Hi everyone, this is For the Love of Comics and a very warm welcome to another episode celebrating Black Hole by Charles Burns. Another episode because last week I uploaded my What is Black Hole video in which I talk a little bit without spoilers about this classic masterpiece. At least in my opinion, it's a classic masterpiece of body horror and teen angst set in the 1970s United States. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, I'll link it up here and in the description below. In this video, I'd like to take a closer look at both the hardcover collected edition as well as the original 12 issues. This video will also be spoiler-free, definitely in the first part when I'm looking at the hardcover and the production of it. The second part, I'll talk a little bit about the single issues and what is not included, because there is a significant amount, not as far as the main story is concerned, but around the main story that is missing from this collected edition that we have in these single issues. And in the final third part of this video, right at the end, I'll talk about one particular omission that I think makes a very big difference to how this story is read. Something that I think of as a secret story, a little tidbit in these single issues that doesn't make its way into the collection. That's a fair amount to cover, so let's dive right into this edition comparison of Black Hole by Charles Burns. Black Hole by Charles Burns is a hefty 360 plus pages book collected in hardcover and paperback, but it's completely manageable. It's very easy to read in bed, which is always my standard of judging if something is too cumbersome or not. It's not oversized. In fact, it's slightly smaller than the original comic size, which I don't believe makes that much of a difference. The hardcover is dust-jacketed and has a very unique red and white design to go with the black and white art. That's sort of a signature of this series, which in itself creates a particular identity for this edition, which I think is quite different from the colorful and varying typography. You can see that even the words black hole is not written the same way across the various issues. It has a very different identity than the single issues did, a very different superficial identity. The collection doesn't present itself as a collection of 12 issues. There really is nothing over here that indicates it was originally published as 12 separate issues, and there is nothing other than the story itself. There are no extras the way you might be used to having in collected comics editions. The dust jacket's front flap has a portrait of Charles Burns in his younger days, and the inside back flap has a more contemporary portrait, or contemporary at the time of publication at least. If you remove the cover, you can see that the inside cover does have printing on it, a significant double page spread from within the story. And the volume is very handsomely produced with firm sewn binding and thick paper with decent reproduction of the black and white artwork. I also quite like the spine design inside the dust jacket. I may be wrong, but I think that Charles Burns is the designer for this collected edition. So this jacket as well as the book itself, I think, is designed by the author himself. The end pages contain those yearbook type character portraits of anonymous people that is a motif in the series, with the front end pages showing them in their uninfected state and the rear end pages showing them with the grotesque deformities that the disease, the bug, has wrought upon them. This is of course completely metaphorical. No one's sitting for the yearbook photograph once they've been infected like this in the story, and these aren't really characters you encounter within the main story itself. We'll see where they come from when we look at the single issues. But I think this is a cool way to present these portraits. Accompanying young Charles Burns and older Charles Burns, you get the before and after of the disease as the literal before and after of the story. As I mentioned, there are no extras over here, no making of featurettes, no interviews with the author. In fact, the entire thing is presented quite like a literary novel. You've got a little bit of blurb writing and author bio, but other than that, there's nothing else to indicate its origin as a serialized comic over multiple issues. which is fine except for what that means it omits. Because the collected edition makes no reference whatsoever in its design to the original issues, you are not given the covers, which is a significant omission because these are magnificent, full color, creepy, wonderful covers drawn and colored, I believe, by Charles Burns himself. They create a very unique way of approaching the story, and this is doubly significant because each of these issues not only has a wonderful front cover, but it also has a wonderful back cover, also drawn and painted by Charles Burns. So over the course of 12 issues, there are actually 24 full color covers completely missing from the novel version. So for those of you who've never seen them, let me really quickly go through the front and back covers of issue number 1. Here's the front, here's the back. Issue number 2, front. Issue number 2, back. Issue number 3, front. Issue number 3, back. Issue number 4, front. And issue number 4, back. The first 4 issues of Black Hole were originally published by Kitchen Sink Press, and you can see they've kept their logo and their number in the back pretty discreetly so as not to interfere with the art of the front or the back cover, which I really appreciate. But Kitchen Sink Press unfortunately went out of business. Luckily, Fantagraphics took over the publication of Black Hole. Fantagraphics reprinted the first 4 issues, so you will also get these in exactly the same design with Fantagraphics information. So Fantagraphics reprinted the first 4 and then continued printing Black Hole from issue 5 onwards. This is the front cover of issue 5, and this is the back, where you'll see they've maintained that discrete approach with Fantagraphics books and the issue number appearing only at the back, bottom, and corner. In fact, because they don't have even the barcode, it's even more discreet than the Kitchen Sink Press editions were. And again, I appreciate how clean that keeps both the front and the back cover. Issue 6 front, issue 6 back, issue 7 front, issue 7 back, issue 8 front, issue 8 back, issue 9 front, which features the image that's been appearing in our title sequence on this channel since we've had one. It's just taken me that long to get to this. Issue 9 back, which has a photograph of these 2 characters with David Bowie makeup and a David Bowie album. This is Aladdin Sane. This album does not appear in this issue, but Diamond Dogs does, which is one of the very few actual direct references to which year or years this is taking place. They mentioned Diamond Dogs as a new album, but other than that, there really isn't any anchor to tell you when this story is taking place. So it's interesting that one of only 2 clues that I've found in this comic about when it's taking place is actually on the back cover of one of the single issues. The front of issue 10, back of issue 10, front of issue 11, the back of issue 11, and finally the front of issue 12 and the back of issue 12. Alongside these glorious front and back covers, another thing that the collected edition is missing are these wonderful end papers. While the collected edition does have these chapter opening pages, it does away, again, necessarily perhaps, with these 2-page end pages. There's just no place where you can have something like this in the middle of something that's representing itself as a novel. And just in the way that I understand that you can't have it in the middle of the book, the way I understand you can't have the covers in the book, I can still think of it as a significant loss. These end pages are gorgeous. They're full of detail. They're done in Charles Burns's inky black and white style beautifully. They really create a mood and a sense for the story that you have just read and ended. And they have this before and after effect as well, where it seems like exactly the same image, but like, for example, there is no Snickers bar wrapper over here that's over here. This is something that has happened. This is a before and after moment, the way that we have before and after portraits, which is also something the single issues give us immediately. They give us full page portraits of these characters, one without the infection and one after. You get this direct juxtaposition of the transformation that this particular kid has undergone on the copyright page. And each issue features not only a different set of end pages. For example, this one in 2 shows this kid asleep with this cigarette ashtray over here and all the mutations on his head. And then over here, the eye on his forehead is open. That's the difference between these two. You get not only the before and after of the front and rear end pages, but these yearbook photographs. We did see how all 12 portraits from the 12 issues are represented here, with all the befores at the beginning of the collected edition and the 12 afters at the end of it, but each single starts with this startling impact of a before and after of one individual kid. Not all of these end pages are a before and after or different, or maybe I'm not able to spot the difference in each one of them. But not only are the end pages missing, but the large full-sized character portraits and especially them juxtaposed right next to each other are also things that you only get in these single issues. Like the front and back covers and the front and rear end pages, the absence of these portraits makes sense as far as a collected book version is concerned, but I do think it's a significant change. Of course, these do not make a difference to the chapters that we're reading, and the plot and the story at the center of Black Hole remains absolutely the same. But it is an additional dimension that the single issues give you, and one that I really enjoy. Aside from this content difference, I would like to point out one production difference as well. If you've read this book in the collected edition, I'm sure you've been impressed by the black and white art, and I'm sure you've been impressed by how inky and dark this black is. But I don't think that one truly understands how black the blacks are until you look at the single issue. It definitely has to do with the paper quality. This is glossy, very thick paper, and the covers themselves. This is something I forgot to mention. These covers are thick card. They are unlike most comics covers that I've encountered. I've seen a couple from Fantagraphics, from Drawn and Quarterly, that have this kind of thick card, but they're glossy. On a complete tangent, this video has been a headache to set up because of exactly how glossy these are. Even now, if I just move it slightly to a side, every light that I have trying to illuminate this thing will bounce off them. But this glossy cardstock used for the covers and this glossy paper is no accident, or it's not just a fashion. This creates a sense of black and white which is quite unlike anything else I've seen in comics. The inkiness of this artwork, I think, is a crucial element to this. I mean, it is a story called Black Hole after all. And if you compare them side by side, the difference is stark. This collected edition, which is a very handsome production of the black and white, held next to the original issues, this starts looking almost washed out in comparison. I don't want it to sound like it's a detraction. The story is just as powerful and just as gripping. It's interesting to me to note how much difference the paper stock is making over here. Without it being about colors, I mean, we're used to seeing glossy and matte paper compared when it comes to newsprint comics and color comics, but in black and white, for a story that is about darkness, that does take place at night, which is called Black Hole, I think it's another dimension of appreciation for me to put these side by side. And the final piece of significant difference between these two versions of the story has to do with the text that starts each single issue. We saw that these dual portraits start each issue, and underneath one is the copyright information and the publication data. Under the second portrait is a little bit of text story blurb. This is not marketing copy or from the publishers. This is stuff that author Charles Burns has written relating to the story and is in the voice of the kids of the story, not of particular named kids, not of Chris and Rob, etc. Not the people we are following. Maybe the anonymous kids who are being presented over here, maybe it's them. It's never really told. It's just a first person sort of narrative. It's a couple of lines. For example, in this one, it was like a horrible game of tag. It took a while, but they finally figured out it was some kind of new disease that only affected teenagers. They called it the teen plague or the bug, and there were all kinds of unpredictable symptoms. For some, it wasn't too bad, a few bumps maybe, an ugly rash. Others turned into monsters or grew new body parts, but the symptoms didn't matter. Once you were tagged, you were it forever. Now, this text is a little expository and it can sound a bit like voiceover narration, but it is removed from the rest of the story. It isn't anyone, as I said, connected to any of the characters, but each chapter starts with that. And each one of these in the voice of some lonely, hurt, teenager, dealing with the kind of issues that they're dealing with, talking about their pain, talking about how this affects them. A couple of them even seem to be from the point of view of uninfected kids. These pieces of text add another dimension to the story. They're not absolutely necessary. Some people might think of them as spelling things out that don't need to be spelled out. Others might think of them as absolutely vital because the story is so dense. These little insights serve as anchors or tethers for us who are otherwise sort of drifting along with the story. They are, again, not reproduced in this collected edition, with the exception of the very first issues. The back blurb of this collected hardcover edition is the text from issue number 1. So it was like a horrible game of tag. It took a while. There you go. So this kind of establishes in a very interesting way, because this is written by the author. This is written in the voice of one of the characters, and it's given to you at the back of the book, but it appears nowhere in the book. So you could think of it as one of the more unusual blurbs you've seen, but that's because it came from one of these issues. Which brings me to my final difference. This is a tiny bit of spoilers, so in case you want absolutely no spoilers, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you at the next video. But for those of you who want to continue, in issue 12, the final issue of the story, there is a very interesting blurb. It seems almost throwaway, and I'll read it to you. It's like trying to explain sex to a nun. There's no way you'd understand it unless you've lived it. I was there, okay? Half my friends died out there, man. I never dreamed I'd get out of that shithole, but one day I noticed the stuff on my face is starting to heal, and a couple of months later, I'm totally clean, out walking around with all the normal assholes. That, in this little extra blurb that could be easily skipped, that is not part of this collected edition, that is an indication that this disease might not be permanent. It's the complete opposite of what the first issue's blurb says, what the back of the book says, because that says once you were tagged, you were it forever. And the entire story is really drenched in this kind of doom and gloom. Even though there are a couple of characters who make a break for it and leave town and seem to be adrift in a different way, who seem to have broken free, we still feel that they've got this disease and they're going to have this disease for the rest of their life, that they're always going to be separated from everyone else because of their mutation. But this one line in issue number 12 seems to indicate that, like adolescence, like puberty and all the pains that come with it, maybe it's temporary, maybe it passes. And that little light, you could call it optimism, you could call it a cop-out, that thing is something that you only get in this issue, in that one sentence, and nowhere else. Maybe it makes a difference, maybe it doesn't, maybe it changes the way you view this story. I don't know. I think it's really intriguing and interesting. And when you couple it with the back and front covers, with the end papers and the full page portraits, I think Black Hole in single issue form and Black Hole in collected edition form, as far as you can have differences in something that's exactly the same, this is one of the biggest differences I've seen between single issues and a collected edition. I hope you enjoyed this look at the collected edition and the single issues of Charles Burns' Black Hole. I would love to have your questions and comments below as always. Thank you so much for watching. This has been For the Love of Comics, and I'll see you at the next video.